Okay, so hang on a minute. Appointment of honorary vice chair from the representatives of the voluntary sector. Who have we actually got here?
So this was deferred at the meeting in October, and as it was deferred, it did have to come onto this agenda. I do appreciate there's only one day left of the municipal year. So if there are no nominations, it could be deferred to the next meeting, or if anyone would like to nominate and they could be nominated again for the next one. Are there any nominations?
Not at the moment, no. So if you can bear with us, we'll make sure that we get our act together for the future.
Okay, thank you. Okay, apologies. So far we've had Christine Kay and Anne Barnaby. Anyone else? Do we know
Councillor Rowland sends his apologies, please, Chair.
Okay. Right. Right, okay. Where are we then? Minutes for the 19th of October.
Happy to move.
Yep, okay, thank you very much. Declarations of interest. Nope. Okay, Project Zero then, please. Who's going to lead us on this?
I'll take this one if that's okay, Chair. I've got some slides to accompany this item, which I'll just share with you. Bear with me a moment. Can I just double check if they're appearing on the screen for you, Chair?
Yes, they are.
Great. Thanks for taking this reference. This is a reference from the Council's Cabinet relating to the climate emergency that was declared by the Council in July of 2019, and just a quick recap of what that declaration contained is shown on this slide. So the declaration was to reduce the Council's carbon emissions to net zero before 2030. It also included to make representations to Welsh and UK governments in order to provide the necessary powers, resources and support to us as local authorities to help us to meet that target. There was a commitment there as well to continue to work with partners across the region in recognition that this is not something that the local authority alone can seek to achieve.
And I stop you there. Can you put? We've been asked to make the slides full screen, if you could, please.
Yeah, no problem at all.
Thank you.
How's that?
Lovely. Everyone happy with that? Right.
Fab. Thank you, Chair. And the final aspect of the declaration was around working with local stakeholders to develop a strategy to meet that net zero emissions target by 2030, as well as looking at how we could work together to maximise other local benefits around aspects such as employment, health, agriculture, transport and the economy. And since that declaration was made in July of 2019, a significant amount of work has continued within the climate change agenda. Most notably, in February 2021, the Public Services Board, so the group of public sector organisations, which third sector colleagues are around that table, agreed a climate emergency charter for the area. And in March 2021, Cabinet launched the consultation on Project Zero, which is the Council's response to that strategy in order to meet the net zero emissions target. And what I was going to run through with you briefly this evening, Chair, as part of that consultation is the 18 challenges and the steps that we're looking to take to meet the challenges. It brings together as well the work that's already underway across the council. This is not something that we need to start a blank sheet of paper on. It needs to draw in all of the different strands and make sure that they fit together so that the sum is greater than the individual parts. And Project Zero is broken down into these three interconnected arenas of work. The first is around the need for the council to demonstrate strong leadership in tackling climate change. The second then is around fulfilling our responsibility to current and future generations. So this is looking at how we can potentially positively influence others and work collectively to take action to tackle climate change. And then thirdly, making a difference now, which starts to explore some of the things that as a local authority we can do that are under our control, and we can start to make that difference as we seek to meet those challenges. So I'll run through the 18 challenges just briefly with you. The first around demonstrating strong leadership. There are commitments here to engage with the community, listening to what their priorities are for tackling climate change and how we can work to support them to make a difference in their communities. There's a need associated with that to raise awareness and understanding around consistent and clear messaging to support that work. And importantly, about developing an evidence base and insight so that we understand and we can measure the impact that our work is having. And then lastly, to embrace our role as community leaders to influence and bring about that positive behaviour change to tackle climate change. And then when we look at the aspects of fulfilling our responsibility to current and future generations, this is looking at taking action around aspects such as flooding, managing our coastline, encouraging people to be responsible with water use. Work is underway within the organisation to look at how we can promote and enhance the green and blue space that exists across our county. And associated with that are things like sustainable drainage, green travel routes, tree coverage. So that would be brought together in a green infrastructure plan. Clearly, the pandemic has had quite wide-ranging impact in terms of economic growth, and there's an opportunity here that's reflected within the Council's recovery strategy and annual delivery plan, and now within Project Zero, about developing and implementing an economic growth strategy that actually meets the challenge of climate change and supports that green recovery from the pandemic. And there's an importance around ensuring planning policy and regeneration activities are consistent to support this agenda as well, and to reduce the negative impact on the environment. This section of the plan goes on to talk about how we can lead by example in terms of reducing the amount of energy that is used, and also to bring in new technology, innovation and investment into the area. Some work that Rachel and I have been doing within Llantwit Major, for example, is associated with this second one around supporting and advocating more sustainable local food systems, leading to fewer food miles, less waste and greater awareness of the impact of our choices in terms of food on the environment. There's a need to continue the work around reducing waste, so putting the facilities, services and the communications behind that, so that we strongly emphasise reuse and recycling. And again, reflecting on the experiences of the last year and developments in recent years about how we can support modal shift, so sustainable forms of transport, including things like walking and cycling, so that there's less polluting transportation in the area. And then the final section, Chair, looks at how we can make a difference now as an organisation. So there are things within our contract management and procurement policies, for example, that we can make changes to show that we support this ambition and reduce waste and carbon emissions. For example, all our new tenders require the reduced use of single-use plastics. The Big Fresh catering company as well, for example, is committed to minimising single-use wherever possible. We also want to invest in our housing stock. A significant amount of work has been done, but there's more to do to make that more energy efficient, and to deliver near zero or at a minimum A-rated for energy new council houses. The commitment that I know members are aware of around building new zero carbon schools, as well as improving our existing school buildings to ensure that they're energy efficient. So there's a significant amount of work both in new development, but also in retrofitting. And then finally, it looks at how we can manage and use our land, building and other assets to support work to tackle climate change. So there have been programs of work to reduce the energy consumption within corporate buildings in recent years, but there's further that we can go. And also looking at how we can reduce the number of car journeys that staff are required to make. This meeting is an example where we haven't all travelled to the civic offices, but equally there's a commitment there to explore how we can introduce electric or low carbon vehicles into the council's fleet. And then finally, commitments around the investment in technology to support working in a more agile way, and also promoting the use of online services so that people don't need to travel to a physical location in order to meet or to transact with us. So they're the commitments within the plan. As I said at the beginning, we are currently consulting. The consultation is running from the 24th of March to the 12th of May. Because of the pandemic, we are limited in terms of the methods by which we can consult. So we are predominantly doing this digitally. There's an online survey which is running until the 12th of May, and I'd encourage all colleagues to promote and complete that. The Managing Director has written to a range of partners, including town and community councils and local interest groups. We've been promoting this quite heavily in terms of our professional contacts and networks as officers as well. We've also run a social media campaign. We're doing some Twitter polling, which you might have seen over the last week or so on aspects of the plan to take the temperature of our residents. As we speak, there's the second of our 4 online discussion groups exploring different themes, which is something that we haven't done very much of previously, but last night's discussion apparently was really good. We are also looking at making sure that we engage with our youth services to get a younger people's perspective, as well as having discussed this at the Vale 50+ Strategy Forum. It's been fantastic to see the engagement the schools have already made with the plan and the consultation process, and we've got plans in place to engage with as many of them as we can. I'm doing a bit of a tour of duty over scrutiny committees and committees such as yours, Chair, this week. So it's been to corporate performance and resources, environment and regeneration. We've been to community liaison and this evening to voluntary sector joint liaison. And finally, we're reaching out to the Public Services Board Climate Change and Asset Management Group as well as part of that consultation. And I wanted to bring the plan here this evening because Cabinet are really keen to get as many views as possible. The next steps for the work is that once the consultation finishes, we'll make any revisions to the plan. It'll look to go back through those scrutiny committees in June, to Cabinet on the 5th of July, and finally back to full council for ratification then on the 26th of July. I'm conscious that that's a really big, quick whistle-stop tour through, but really it would be great to have any initial views in terms of, are they the right challenges, and does it feel like the right framework? Does it feel ambitious enough, and will it deliver? Thank you.
I apologise. Thank you very much. Yes, it's comprehensive, isn't it? It covers every facet of what the council does. And Tom, that was a really good presentation. I have to say, I managed to listen to it all over again, despite the fact I've heard it before, which has got to be a good thing, isn't it? Right, is there anybody who'd like to come in, please? I've got AC and RG. AC is, where are we?
I'm Jane.
Right, okay, so where are we? So AC, RG.
AC is me, but I think Rachel had her hand up before me because I've literally only just put it up.
All right, okay, so Rachel, then Millie, then Jane, please. You're muted.
Yeah, thank you, Chair. I thought Jane was before me, but
all right, let's stop being polite and just get on with it. Come on.
Yeah, great presentation, Tom. I think it's fully comprehensive. I guess for me, it's how do we link in the third sector and all of the assets that the third sector has into things like developing the electrical powering points, you know, because there are lots of community centres, lots of other organisations based throughout the Vale that could be included in the development of that. When you're looking at improving the carbon footprints and issues around buildings, making them more energy efficient, then again, all of those community sector buildings really, if we could make sure that they're included with any of those developments, I think that's going to be vitally important. And that was it. I have no doubt I'll be hearing this presentation at the Public Service Board on Friday as well.
Okay, thank you very much. Millie.
To be honest, Rachel basically just asked what I was going to ask. But apart from that, I want to just say that that was a very comprehensive report. It sounds very promising. It is a lot of work, though, and we do have to try and make sure we stick to any government deadlines or anything like that with this. But basically, yes, I was going to ask what Rachel asked about the third sector involvements, because there are things like community centres, as Rachel pointed out, where we could ask to have electrical charging points put into car parks, etc., things like that. But it's just worth investigating.
Okay, thank you, Jane, and then Liz.
Thank you, Tom. It's a very comprehensive report. Just one or two questions. First of all, how do you intend to balance the need for housing and development, which we obviously want, with the loss of green land, green space, and the deforestation of trees, which again we need, and get the balance? And also, overdevelopment again causes flooding. It is not a known fact because of the under concrete and that and loose. So how do you, as the Vale Council, well, not saying you personally, obviously, intend to get this balance right for the future?
Okay, thank you. Right, I'm going to bring Liz in, and then perhaps Tom could take it on the taking together, please. Liz.
Thanks, Chair. This is a wide-ranging report, but it needs to be, because this topic touches so many areas of our lives, but also of the council's operation. And I think what will be really helpful in this consultation is for us to be able to look at where our priorities should be, where we need to act quickly and act more comprehensively in the future. Huge thanks to Tom. I've attended all these presentations, but he's done them. So it's been a hard couple of weeks, hasn't it, Tom, for you? But the range of views that we've heard during that period have been really helpful, and we need to keep getting more. So I think, as Tom says, while we've got the initial sort of timeline of taking it back to Cabinet, and from there on to Council, this process will not stop there, and this is something that we need to keep revisiting, and we need to keep engaging more and more people in this agenda if we're actually going to achieve quite far-reaching targets by the ambitious deadline that we've set ourselves. So thanks ever so much, Tom, for giving up all your evenings over at least the last week or so.
Okay, thank you very much. Tom, I don't know if you've got any, right, Millie, is that a legacy hand or is that current?
Sorry, I forgot to take it down.
No, that's okay. Tom, I don't know if you've got any comment to make on Jane's point she raised about, housing and, bringing it up to date and making sure that it's carbon neutral.
Certainly, I think Councillor Norman's question is a really good illustration of actually how this is an integrated agenda, that actually there is a need to balance. And as the Deputy Leader was just describing, it is such a wide-ranging topic, and actually there are lots of different levers and lots of different buttons that get pushed, and they have different effects on things. And we've given a lot of thought to how planning, green infrastructure, water use, bringing flood management and water management together. And that's the reason, I would say, Councillor Norman, for it being one council strategy rather than it being lots of individual disparate pieces of work. And you're absolutely right that the issues around planning, and I'm certainly not qualified to comment on the technical detail of planning legislation, but it does demonstrate the need to balance both the demand for housing, but also the arrangements that are made when housing applications are considered, and equally then the way that we mitigate any potential impact on climate change. So the encouragement through supplementary planning guidance of energy efficiency measures, the transportation that's put in place around housing development. So it is a very holistic kind of picture that we need to consider. It's not there's no easy answer with some of this stuff, which is why the Deputy Leader was just describing the need for it to be all considered together.
Thank you, Tom.
Right, okay. Is there anything anybody else wants to bring up on this? No, in that case, thank you very much, Tom. Oh, there's a hand, but I don't know who it belongs to.
It's Linda Newton. Sorry, I just wanted to. I flagged it up in chat just to say I would support Jane what she says about biodiversity and green and balancing that. And I know third sector groups would be interested in that and the value for mental health as well. So it's just a little comment on the side really to back that up.
Okay, thank you very much. Does anybody else want to comment before I let Tom go? No? Okay, thank you very much. Thank you very much, Tom. Right, glass of wine.
You're on.
Right, okay, thank you very much. Let's move on, please, and look at the coronavirus recovery grant for volunteering, please.
Thank you very much.
I'm assuming that Rachel's going to take us through that one.
Sadly, it's me for the next three reports, Chair. I will try and get through them as quickly as I can. The first one actually refers to a Welsh Government element of the recovery fund that they were running. And back in the autumn, they put out a call for bids on a regional basis to look at recovery for volunteering. And I guess basically what we'd all learnt during the previous 7 or 8 months whilst going through the pandemic and how that had impacted on volunteering. So we worked very quickly with our colleagues in Vale Council. So great thanks to Helen Moses and James Rees. And we put together for the Vale our ideas of how we wanted to take this forward. We then met with colleagues in Cardiff, so Cardiff Third Sector Council, which is our counterpart, and Cardiff Council, and Health also participated, but in a hands-off approach. So we decided here in the Vale that what we wanted to do was to look at 3 elements to bid for funding to help us achieve this. And we were looking at volunteering, because that's what the pot was about, working with informal community-based groups. And by those, I mean those Facebook COVID-19 groups that sprang up so quickly in March, April and May last year to actually help deliver services within their own communities. And we also wanted to look at volunteer training. And what we were hoping to learn from this was what had encouraged people to get involved in volunteering during this time span, but also what would help them stay engaged with volunteering, and also to improve then the level and type of training that was available to volunteers. And we wanted specifically also to work with those informal COVID-19 groups to see if there was any way that we could persuade them to formalise and continue their existence post-COVID. So you'll see from the report that there are a variety of elements that were undertaken within the volunteering tranche. So carried out a survey. All of this was done within a remarkably quick turnaround. Welsh Government asked for bids in December. They told us whether we'd been successful or not in January. And then we actually started work, I think it was the first week in February, so and had to finish it by the end of March. So it was an extraordinarily tight time scale for us, but team managed to achieve this. And as I say, with great input from colleagues within the local authority. So survey undertaken, and you can see from that there are links to the Vale Hero site, and the appendix shows the response and questions that were included within that questionnaire. We really had seen that there had been just over 1,000 volunteering inquiries during the first 2.5 months that after COVID struck, And we wanted to deal with those people specifically to see what had got them engaged in the volunteering and how we could keep them engaged moving forward. You can see that 82% of respondents found a volunteering opportunity very easy to find. 48% of respondents said that it was their first time volunteering in any capacity. So that was a fantastic response from people out there in the community. A large number of them were retired. The others were on furlough. So you know, that there was a range of age groups and backgrounds involved in all of this volunteering, and 85% of respondents, which we were very heartened to hear, are interested in continuing their volunteering in the future, whether within their existing role or looking for alternative roles as we come out of COVID. So really useful information for us as the agency here in the Vale of Glamorgan that operates the Volunteer Centre and undertakes that recruitment and matching and placement of volunteers for third sector organisations operating in the Vale. Then we had been working already with those COVID-19 groups. We'd had a variety of funding pots that we'd been able to provide resource from to those groups to help them deliver the services that they wanted to. The majority of them were informal, so not constituted in any shape or form, come together, you know, on the spur of the moment with great heart to respond to the crisis that we were all facing. But we continue to work with them and contact them to find out whether any of those groups were interested in becoming a permanent fixture here in the Vale of Glamorgan, so not disappearing with the end of the pandemic, but perhaps becoming more formalised and continuing to deliver a variety of services to those communities that they were working with. So it was a very short period of time to actually undertake any of that work. And that is something that GVS is committed to taking forward throughout the rest of this financial year, because the time to work with groups is inevitably a longer period. So one group has decided to work towards formalisation. Another group had actually, we'd helped them to formalise earlier in the last financial year. So quite pleased with that response at the moment, but as I say, a tremendous amount of other work needs to be undertaken to ensure that we don't lose that goodwill, that effort, and the inspirational work that those groups have undertaken during the past year or so. And then the other element that we wanted to focus in on was volunteer training. So we wanted to be able to offer local groups mechanisms for easy access to generic training for their volunteers, so not specific to the activity that they might be undertaking for a specific organisation, but getting them to think about the sorts of commitment, responsibility, you know, why they might be undertaking volunteering, etc. So with Yoke Creative, which is a local animation firm that the local authority put us in touch with, we created a getting involved in volunteering animation, which we're very pleased with, and you can see that there is a link to it from the report. But we're actually going to launch this in Volunteers Week, which is the first week in June, so the 1st to the 7th of June this year. So there will be some teasers from it going out in social media, and then the actual video will be launched in Volunteers Week. So it gives you an idea of the sort of costings that were involved, and the conclusions, and basically I'm happy to take any questions on this report, Chair.
Okay, thank you. Am I seeing any hands up? No. Okay, well, can I start by saying thank you very much for that. TB That Tom?
It's Tom.
It's Tom, is it? Right, okay. Okay, go on then.
Thank you. I wanted to stay for this item and really just to extend my thanks to Rachel for linking in with Helen and James so quickly and so effectively. I think it's fair to say that we really capitalised on the opportunity to get this grant for something really meaningful, and it was no mean feat to turn this this around in such a short space of time. And one of the things that Rachel and I have been discussing is that legacy for Vale Heroes, and I think the work and the foundations that this grant funding has provided is really going to help us in taking that forward into the future. So it was a really good timely opportunity for us, and just a thank you to Rachel for picking it up and running with it really quickly.
Thanks, Tom.
Okay, thank you. Okay, I've got a couple of points that I'd like to raise. First of all, my concern was, I mean, because I have been kind of marginally involved with the Penarth Helping Hands group, particularly at the beginning. But one of my concerns was that there were people who wanted to volunteer, but were not interested in getting involved in any kind of formal structure, because otherwise they would already have been volunteering.
Mm.
And they kind of moved away from that. And I know that when the idea of, just D&B checks came up, they were, I mean, I'm not saying that they had anything to hide, but they were like, this is a kind of element of formality that they weren't really interested in. So I'm quite interested in your comment on that. And also whether people who are going into other people's homes or standing on the doorsteps and helping them out with various things, whether they know enough to signpost these people to services that they may need long term. Because it's all very well picking up your next door neighbour's medicine, but she may actually need more than that. She may need social services involvement. She may need to have a district nurse or whatever, and whether volunteers, very well meaning and so forth, and helping out and so forth, are actually able to spot when somebody needs to be referred on to a more formal service. I mean, that's enough for me to start with.
Okay, yeah, you're absolutely right. There are individuals out there who are not happy to undertake the bureaucracy that surrounds some volunteering opportunities. The B&D is a barrier to quite a few individuals. I think the nature of the beast, as it were, at the start of the pandemic was we needed people as quickly as possible to help those individuals who were shielding officially and those who were self-isolating. And really through the Vale Heroes site, we were able to make sure that any individual who was over the age of 65 was getting assistance either directly from Age Connects or indirectly from Age Connects through a referral through to one of the COVID-19 groups. And then ourselves as GVS, we were making referrals to agencies for those individuals who were under the age of 65. But that is a massive challenge for us, and that's one of the reasons why we were keen to get in contact with those individuals to see whether they were going to be interested in pursuing and continuing with volunteering in the future. As a group itself formalises and becomes constituted and has in place all the correct policies, then it's inevitable that there is more bureaucracy in the way in which volunteers are involved. But I guess for probably the first 6 months or so, the guidance from Charity Commission, the guidance from our partners in the local authority with regards to social services were that we had to sidestep some of that bureaucracy just to get the help out there. And then with regards to referrals, we were undertaking some follow-ups to make sure that individuals had received the service that they had requested, and then there was that opportunity to refer back into our partner in local authority. So didn't happen as often as perhaps we thought it might. And initially, to be perfectly honest, Janice, the lack of online shopping opportunities and slots was the key issue. And as we moved through the year, fewer and fewer people were requiring that. It was the very elderly who needed to continue with that level of support and assistance. And Age Connects did an absolutely sterling and amazing job, as did Dinas Power's voluntary concern and the Helping Hands in Penarth. So, you know, that they were our stalwarts, and in fact Llanthwaite Major Town Council were involved in coordinating some of that activity in Llanthwaite Major. So, you know, I think across the Vale we developed some quite astonishing responses to the difficulties that people were facing. But I guess there was a worry from our colleagues in local authority, in social services, that perhaps they might be finding more and more individuals who were going to require packages of care. But I'm not convinced from my discussions with them that actually has arisen. They seem to be more short-term needs and requirements that people were after, and once those were in place, they were not looking for any additional input or support. Age Connects and Dinas Power's voluntary concern have got excellent policies and procedures in place and train their volunteers really well to ensure that they can recognise the sorts of signs that might require onward referral. You know, they look at obstacles in the home, etc., that might cause falls and slips, and and assess whether somebody requires any additional input and help.
Okay, thank you very much for that. Has anyone else got a comment they'd like to make, please? No? Well, I would be quite interested in having an update on this, because obviously, as I'm not saying the pandemic is going away, I think it's just going to change in the way that it affects us, but I think it would be interesting to look at the long-term effects sorry, on voluntary organisations, and whether they're able to maintain the momentum that they had a year ago.
A lot of that will depend on resources, I think, and what resources are available to enable them to continue. And that's certainly something that we're pursuing as an agency.
Yeah, I would agree with you there, Rhiannon, because that is something that does need to be looked into. And Rachel, if you say you're pursuing it, but actually no, sorry, I've forgotten what I was going to say. Sorry. Yeah.
Well, if I can explain how we are pursuing it, we've managed to get additional funding from Welsh Government to run another small grant scheme that is specifically focused on those Facebook and COVID-19 groups that aren't constituted and have great difficulty in accessing resources. Because of that, so it's small amounts of money that are going out to them. Plus, we've managed to persuade our partners in health to ensure that we have another grant scheme running this year that continues the work that we were involved in last year. We had 7 grant schemes that we were managing last year. We've got 4 so far this year, and we are trying to persuade Welsh Government to give us some more resources as we move forward, because, you know, a lot of resource was made available during the past 12 months, but we know that there's a dearth of resource as we move forward. So it's high on our list of priorities.
Yes. And I must apologise to Rhiannon as well, because I've just realised I forgot to put.
No, don't worry about that.
My hand up to speak. I'm sorry.
No, don't worry. Is that Linda's hand I see?
Yeah, sorry, it's Linda again. I'll put the camera on just to show you a sec. Well, come on. Oh. Just support Rachel on that. I know I'm from the mental health background. I know a lot of mental health agencies made good use of the additional COVID resource over the last year, and are concerned that that's gone now, though the mental health needs are continuing. So, yes, we're looking for additional resources there too, just to support Rachel on that.
Okay, thank you very much. Yes, I mean, I'd be interested to see what happens to these groups that are resisting being constituted. And I mean, obviously they're not going to say why, but I think people are afraid of formality, and very often I think they haven't got somebody who's prepared to step up and do the admin work. Because I know, we've all been involved in voluntary organisations around this table, and it always falls in one person's lap, and you can see people resisting that. And obviously some of the most effective people who've been volunteering have probably gone back to work now.
Absolutely.
And take their skills with them.
Yeah, absolutely. A lot of them were on furlough and got involved. So it's a real challenge. And, it's our intention to continue to work with those groups, those that continue to exist anyway, because a lot of them will disappear. But we're keen, now that we've got that egress into local communities in that manner, that we don't really want to lose it. For the delivery of services in the future, and our colleagues in the local authority, having that access to grassroots community has been absolutely vital. Yes.
Okay, thank you very much then. If we could have a look at item 7, please, which is GVS involvement in the vaccination programme.
Thank you, Chair. This was really just to inform colleagues in the local authority of the work that we've been undertaking around vaccination. And this goes back to last August, when we first got involved with health in looking at the rollout of vaccinations ahead of when vaccinations were actually available to be rolled out. So, and we were looking at this specifically from a third sector perspective, and just trying to make sure that the third sector service delivery and frontline workers were recognised in a similar way to our colleagues in local authority and health, because we did have a large number of third sector organisations delivering care and support to individuals with learning difficulties, individuals with physical disabilities, etc., who were frontline staff, but not initially being included in the vaccination programme that our colleagues in the statutory sector were looking to receive. So we managed here in Cardiff and the Vale, so that's our counterparts in Cardiff and ourselves, through the massive amount of work that our health and social care facilitators undertook, to be the first region in Wales to recognise third sector frontline workers and to get them vaccinated in the same way and at the same time as others. And it was also to make sure that, the volunteers that were involved in delivering the vaccination programme and helping with marshalling and various other things were properly prepared and were being appropriately looked after and supported by our colleagues in health. So a variety of things were undertaken. We were keen to make sure that the right messages were getting out there to the BAME communities and those hard to reach communities, to ensure that they were also going to participate in accessing vaccinations. So really useful work, really in-depth work that had been undertaken, and it was just really to make sure that our partners in the local authority were aware of how much work had been undertaken and how important it had been to get that recognition for third sector organisations. And you'll be aware, I think, that over the last week there have been announcements that third sector organisations and volunteers are able to access the testing facilities on a more regular basis, so they can have, like the children in secondary schools, etc., they can have their sets of testing kits to undertake a test twice a week to keep on top of the spread and protect the people that they're working with, either colleagues or clients. That following on from this, Chair, is actually the next report, and if it's okay with you, I'd like to take them both together. Is that acceptable?
Well, can I ask if there's anyone who wants to ask anything about the vaccination programme and our involvement in it, please? Right, Linda Newton, you've got a hand up. Is this legacy, or is it from the last point or last item, or is it current?
Sorry, I forgot to put it down.
No, don't worry. Okay, we're all doing it. Right, okay, no, if you want to slide gracefully into item 8, Rachel, you go ahead.
Yeah, basically as part of that work, we have undertaken an evaluation of the third sector experience of receiving vaccinations, so that we could get a better grip on exactly how the rollout was working within our third sector here in Vale and indeed in Cardiff. And so we were looking at how staff and volunteers were feeling about having the vaccine, you know, whether they'd been listed as a priority or whether they'd not yet been invited to book, any concerns that they might have been having themselves, or that they had heard from other staff or volunteers that might impact on them being perhaps reluctant to for the uptake of the vaccine, and asking organisations around the uptake of vaccinations amongst staff and volunteers. So for us, really quite important information for us to be able to share with public health, so that we could see what patterns were emerging across the population as a whole, but specifically within our own sector. So you can see from item 2 there, and 2.1, that there was the majority of staff were positive about the vaccination, that they were all very grateful to be acknowledged and recognised as frontline workers. The extra security and safety and confidence that this gave to those workers and volunteers, and you know, the fact that they felt relief and pleased to be moving on through the process that will hopefully start to enable us all to return to some form of normality. You can see that there were questions asked about any reluctance or issues and concerns that people might have, and you can see the sort of responses that were received. Wonderful to see that the uptake ranged between 75% to 100%. However, you'll see from the next point there under 2.3, in one organisation, 4 out of the 5 staff who'd not accessed the vaccine were from a BAME background. And so it has been really important that we tailor our information and advice and support to make sure that all sectors of our communities are confident about accessing vaccination. Under 2.4, you can see again that staff and volunteers were pleased to receive the vaccines, giving that extra security and sense of comfort, high take-up, vast majority of team being positive and receiving the vaccine. So some good feedback there that, as I say, we were then able to feed into the broader public health data and evidence that they've been gathering. As I say, and I have a great deal of pride in the fact that our health and social care facilitators in the Vale and Cardiff were the ones that really pushed health to consider the fact that individuals who were delivering these services but employed in the voluntary sector had an equal standing to access vaccinations. And again, I'm repeating myself, but just to say that we were the first and the rest of Wales then followed. Right,
thank you very much. Thank you. Okay, has anybody got a comment that they'd like to make, please? Am I seeing any hands? No. Okay, in that case, I'm going to start off by saying I'm interested in what you're saying about BAME employees or volunteers who don't want to access it. I know that this is a fact. My sister works in a hostel for a respite hostel in Hackney in London, and they have had problems getting their BAME staff to take up the vaccination. Goodness knows why, particularly as they had a member of staff die last December from the BAME community. But I wondered if there was anything we could do to kind of like cheerlead them on, you know, whether we need to bring in a doctor or a nurse or a medical person from the BAME community in order to kind of emphasise the importance of it. Because I mean, we're going to get to the point where we're not going to want to employ people to work with the vulnerable if they haven't been vaccinated. I mean, I don't know how far down the road that's going to be, but I imagine sooner or later it's going to be a requirement, isn't it?
What we managed to join in with the wider population, so not just third sector agencies and reluctance of BAME staff and volunteers to access the vaccine, but across Cardiff and Vale, we have been delivering vaccinations from mosque premises and other community centres to ensure that there's that feeling of familiarity and security and comfort, that people are not going into the unknown, you know, to a big sports centre that they've perhaps never been to before, and the fears that are associated with some of that for some communities. So I think that Public Health and Cardiff and Vale Health Board have tried to deliver the vaccination programme in as many ways as they possibly can. So much so that, you know, even ourselves, GVS, we have a premises in Llantwit Major, which we'd worked with a local surgery last summer to deliver childhood vaccinations because a lot of children had been missing out on them because of the lockdown, the first lockdown, and then working further with that surgery to help them deliver their vaccinations actually within our community centre. So we'd spent quite a bit of money on actually making sure that we were completely COVID hygiene secure in that building, with lots of equipment and screens and goodness knows what else in place. And the local surgery was then able to use the building. And now what's happened is the other surgery in Llantwit and a surgery in Cowbridge are using the centre to ensure that they've got delivery of the vaccination actually closer to home, rather than individuals having to travel to Barry, which, you know, is about a 25 minutes from Llantwit each way, or if they had the misfortune to have to go to Splot, then an hour each way, which was putting up some barriers to individuals accessing the vaccine. So I think across the board we're learning, aren't we? Our partners in health are learning and calling for input and support and help from partners in local authority and third sector to ensure that we get our populations vaccinated as quickly and effectively as we possibly can.
Right, okay, thank you very much. So where are we? Jane and then Linda, please.
Just a quick, going back to the lack of take-up of a vaccine, do you find it's a large number of women rather than the men who are affected by this? or is it across the board?
Councillor, it appears to be across the board. At the moment, I haven't seen any figures that are suggesting for the Vale of Glamorgan that it's more male or more female. I think what's happened is that people have been reluctant to travel. Public transport is not great, is it, from the Western Vale to anywhere, and people's reluctance to use public transport at the moment anyway. So if they haven't got their own transport, then they were kind of at the mercy of just an inability to actually access premises where vaccinations were being delivered. Although I have to say that community transport in the Vale has done an excellent job, and quite a few of the taxi services also have been very willing to provide discounted, if not free, service for individuals getting to and from vaccination centres. But even so, there are still barriers.
Yeah, I was specifically thinking of the BAME community, because I know a lot of women in the community have a reluctance to go into this sort of environment because of their way of life and their beliefs. And I was wondering if that was holding back. Would it be possible, I don't know how, to have like a female-only clinic or something where these ladies could go, if that was a barrier?
My understanding is that they have respected that in where they have set up clinics in mosques. So I think actually the leaders of the mosques were quite keen to ensure that there was that separation. But that only deals with one particular section of the BAME community, and it doesn't deal with other sections. So I'm not aware at the moment that there are any female-only vaccination clinics anywhere other than in mosques.
Thank you.
Okay, thank you. Right, Linda Newton and then Liz Burnett, please.
It was only a quick comment. I know some of the BAME voluntary sector groups that cover Cardiff and Vale have been doing some work with their communities around vaccination, linking with medical staff around that. But I'm not sure how much coverage that was in the Vale, and it was online, so they wouldn't have reached everybody. But I suppose there's something to sort of build on if we wanted to go down that route.
Okay, thank you. Liz.
Thanks, Chair. Obviously, any disparity in uptake is something that needs to be explored. I would, however, reassure committee that we get updates regularly in terms of vaccination programme and uptakes, Cardiff and Vale as a whole, Cardiff separate, Vale separate. The last I saw when they were looking at over 50s, which is the last one where they've mainly covered, we were well into the 90% of vaccination. Below that, we're into the 80%. And while there is a little bit of concern over some people not turning up to appointments, that could be through confusion over appointments, maybe, not getting the communications. Although talking to my son the other day, he had a letter, a phone call and a text. So, so they are chasing up. Our figures are looking very good overall. And I think that, any groups where there may be a reticence for whatever reason, that steps are being taken to reassure those people. As I said, at the moment, in terms of our figures would not indicate or suggest that there is a major area of concern that we all that everyone needs to panic about. I just wanted to add that in.
Okay, thank you.
Thank you, Councillor. And just to say, I've got my second jab this Saturday, so my age group certainly is being looked after.
I've got mine tomorrow.
Excellent.
So how long is that since your first one then?
February.
Oh, right. Okay.
Yeah.
Okay.
Yeah, mine was February as well for my first.
Oh,
My
right.
second tomorrow
I'm waiting
in
for my-
Barry.
Just to confirm,
Right.
everyone, this is going on the internet. So is everyone happy with that information being put on YouTube?
No problem at all.
Wonderful,
Very-
thank you.
Very happy to be having my second jab.
Just needed to confirm, thank you.
I
It just
think that
tells,
we should be seen to be doing this. Be seen to be doing it, to be honest.
it just tells everybody exactly how old we are, depending upon when we had our jabs.
I carefully didn't mention that. Right, Millie.
Yeah, just well, saying about COVID, I'm 39, but due to some health issues, I was actually given my first jab last month, and my next one is due 10 to 12 weeks after the first one, so sometime around the end of May, beginning of June, something around that. And I have to admit that I have been impressed with the rollout of the jabs in Wales, and particularly the Vale of Glamorgan, and I've been impressed with the level of take-up as well. Our figures are looking good, and people like yourselves, Rachel, and the volunteers going into these centres, they've got to be applauded. They've got to be applauded for their hard work in helping to get this done. There is no way the figures sorry, no way the numbers of people who have had their jabs so far could have been achieved without volunteers coming in and helping out. So big round of applause to you all.
Thank you very much, Councillor.
Absolutely. Right, okay. Has anybody got anything else that they'd like to add to the meeting? No? Okay, well, it only remains for me to thank everyone for coming, and Rachel in particular for being able to provide such a wide variety of information. I'm going to be very interested to see those follow-up reports. Could you give us an idea of when the next meeting is, please, Catherine?
I think it's October, but let me open up my corporate calendar so I can actually confirm that for you. Give me 2 seconds.
Thank you.
Voluntary sector. Oh, forgive me, that's wrong. We've got one on the 28th of June, according to the calendar of meetings.
Right.
So there will be a reminder sent out to officers as usual. So hopefully we'll have some more business in June.
Excellent. Okay, thank you very much, everybody.
Thank you.
Thank you,
Good
Chair.
night now.
Good night.
Bye.
Thanks, everyone.
Bye, everyone.
Bye-bye.